All right, again, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Greg Zweig with Ribbon Communications. And a little later in this session, I'll take a second and talk a little bit about what Ribbon Communications does with Microsoft Teams, but I want to get right into it this morning. So I'm lucky enough to be able to welcome our two Teams experts. Kevin Keeler is going to start us off with the first tip of the morning, and Tom Arbuthnot who's going to follow on with tip 2, and they'll go back and forth with their tips. Now, both of these gentlemen are truly Teams experts. They've been Kevin is the co-founder of Enable UC, and he's a BC Strategies expert. And many of you may know Tom Arbuthnot from his Tom Talks blogs, and he more recently founded Empowering Cloud. So they have great depth of knowledge. I look forward to having them explain these tips. And just one last thing, which is we will, of course, make the recording available. We'll make the slides available. We're also going to do a poll at the end of this session. So we want you to be ready to vote for the best tip. And I think Kevin and Tom have, several $1,000s riding on the answer. So be sure
there's definitely a drink at Enterprise Connect on it. If nothing else.
So vote carefully. What do they say? Vote early and vote often. But anyways, and then last but not least, and some of you have already noticed, we will be paying attention to the chat. So if you ask a question and there's a spot to intercede, we'll even try and answer that live. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you to get our first tip.
Fantastic. So I have a LinkedIn newsletter called Taming Teams, but this first tip I call Commanding Teams. And I think before we dive in, you'll notice that all of my tips are in the dark mode, and I noticed that Tom's uses the light mode. So either I'm cooler or maybe I'm on the dark side. I guess we'll let the audience decide. So tip number 1, you have this wonderful, search bar at the top, which says search, but as soon as you click in it, then it tells you that, hey, you can, search, or you can type the / key for a list of commands. And really, then it gives you this whole list of commands that I've shown in number 3. And that lets you unlock some, commanding power of Teams. And if we go to the next slide, I would encourage you to look at this whole list, but I'm going to share some of my favorite ones. You can do /DND to instantly set your status to do not disturb, which is fantastic when you try to do focused work. You can see there's also the commands to set it to all the other statuses. Unfortunately, there is no reset. There should be a /reset command to reset your status, but there's not. A go-to is a great command. So if you're in an organization with lots of teams and lots of channels, if you type /go-to, it pops up, and then you can just type in letters, like if you're looking for the human resources team or channel, and it'll match that. And that's a quick way to navigate if you've got hundreds or thousands of channels and teams. And then the last one, test call. We all know before we get on a call, you see the video preview, so you know how you're going to look. But unfortunately, you don't necessarily know how you're going to sound to external participants. And sometimes, you're using the wrong mic. So if you do /test call, this little bot, this echo bot pops up, and it says to test your call quality, record a short message after the beep, and then it plays it back to you. So you hear exactly how you're going to sound. And of course, Teams keeps adding new features. So the last kind of favorite command is the /what's new, and that will display all of the recent improvements to Teams. And I would suggest you do that /what's new on a weekly or at least a monthly basis. And with that, that's tip number 1 from Kevin, and over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Kevin. That's a good one, especially the test call, because that's quite fussy to get to, but getting to it in one / command is really nice. So for my first tip, this is one that I always talk to people about, is the big part of Teams is collaborating on files, but that doesn't mean you have to use the files in Teams. Often people get frustrated with trying to find their files or using the default, which is the web apps in Teams. So kind of 2 tips in one here. First off, be sure if you're using files often in a team, sync them to your PC. And if you look at the screenshot there, you can go into an individual channel and click sync in the top right, but you can also navigate one level back. So if you click documents there, that will sync all the channels files for the entire team. And when you're syncing files, you're syncing with OneDrive. So it doesn't mean it necessarily has to pull all the files down into your hard drive because you have Cloud Sync. So you'll effectively have placeholders for those files. So you're not putting down gigs of data, but what you are giving yourself is the ability to quickly find those files in File Explorer on your desktop like you would any other files. Makes it so much easier to jump in and out of files. And then paired with that tip is in the settings in Teams, which you'll see on the bottom left, you can change the default way files open. So I always change this to desktop. Like web apps are great for maybe a quick edit, but they're not functionally equivalent to the desktop apps. And most people just have the muscle memory of using desktop apps. So if you change that setting, anytime you click a file in files in Teams or in chat, it will always default to opening with the full desktop apps. Still syncing, still synchronized into Teams, co-editing exactly like you would co-edit in the web apps, but in that full-fledged desktop app. And with that, over to Kevin for number 3.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I agree with you. Like the web app is fine, but then you try to do something that you're used to and it doesn't work. And and going into settings, like every time I go into settings, there's new settings, right? So that's something you definitely got to go back to. So talking about like the desktop apps, one of the things that they have is keyboard shortcuts. Well, here's a command, because Teams has a lot of keyboard shortcuts and you can really be a power user and it speeds up a bunch of things. So if you go to that command bar that I talked about in tip 1, for tip 2, if you type /keys, you get this list that's shown right there that shows all of the many keyboard shortcuts. And, I certainly don't use all of these, but some of these are very useful. For instance, the control equals and control minus zooms in and zooms out. So sometimes, I don't know, there's a chat and you just want to zoom out so you can see more of the chat or depending on what you're displaying in a particular app, or you can then zoom in, and Control 0 then just resets the zoom level. So I really like that. We talked about the go-to command, but here it's even faster. If you just do Control G, that immediately then lets you type in the name of the team or channel, and you can go to that. And we're going to talk about searching in more detail, but Control F lets you then directly type in to find something in the current channel or chat. So there's a long list that I didn't, that scrolls down of these keyboard commands. This one's showing you for whatever desktop client. I was on a Windows client, but I highlighted by that number 1. You can click on that link there to see the shortcut keys if you wanted to know across the different clients. So the Mac client has slightly different keyboard shortcuts. So that's tip 2, and definitely a way to, be a power user of Teams.
That's true power user stuff. If you see people at Teams and they're clicking around based on the keyboard, they're a power user.
That's right. They're being more efficient.
Nice. So number 4. So this one's interesting. So I was quite anti this initially. It's scheduled chat messages send. So I think of Teams as asynchronous, which means that I can send a message when I want to and you can pick it up when you want to. But obviously people treat Teams in different ways. And what I have noticed is with building in Power and Cloud and working in my own company, I'm working all different hours. I don't want to enforce people feeling they need to reply because I'm working out of hours. So I use this a lot, maybe late on a Friday, or if I'm working on a Saturday or a Sunday, catching up a little bit. You can right click on the send button in Teams, or on the mobile client, you can press and hold, and you can then schedule that message to send up to 14 days in advance by picking a date and picking a time. So two really good use cases for this. One is just being polite. If you know the person's time zone or it's weekend, particularly if you're a manager or a more senior role in an organization, by sending something out of hours, you might be putting pressure on that person unintentionally to feel like they need to reply. So you can just set it up, non-urgent. I usually set them to 9-10 o'clock on the Monday morning. There is an inverse thing here, which is potentially the person like Lindsay, who's on the call, who works with me, might get a barrage at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. But I feel like that's better than a weekend message. And also here, you can use these to time a reminder. So say you want to remind somebody that on Tuesday at 11 o'clock, there's a certain thing that needs to happen. You're going to be away from your computer or you're away from the office. You can set specific messages for specific times to prompt that person. I find that really, really useful. And note, these are not in channel messages because channel is truly asynchronous. So you should be able to post any time there. But with direct chat messages, both internal users and external users, you can do this. Just a note, the very first message you send can't be timed. So that first message can't. From then on, you'll see the timed option. Cool. And I'm going to hand over to Greg now. Ribbon have been a great supporter both of this webinar and Empowering Cloud. And Greg's going to take you through some of the Ribbon value for Microsoft Teams.
And Tom, it occurs to me that there's also another way to use that, which is, if you want to convince your boss that you're really working hard, then what you should do is set your, it's 5:15 at night, set all your messages to come to your boss at say,
well, that's how your brain works, Greg. I didn't even think of that, but that might be the winning tip.
Right. I mean, 6:30 at night on a Friday, you should be sending messages to your boss asking questions. But then you do have to think about what happens if he or she responds back.
Yeah, you have to be ready.
Well, Ribbon's tip here is really around the fact that for many of you who may not be familiar, you can use Microsoft Teams as your phone system. Now, most people think of Teams in terms of calling people. So, I could call, Kevin or Tom if they're in the same company. But what about when you want to be able to call people outside your organization, talk to a customer, talk to an associate in a partner or something of that nature? Well, there's a way to enable Teams to be the office phone system. And what Ribbon does really is we make tools to make that process easier and secure. We make something called a Session Border Controller, SBC. Basically, think of it like a voice firewall. And we offer those solutions as hardware, as software, or as a service. So you can have it as a per month cloud service. And really, our objective is to make it easy for you to connect Teams Phone to the telecom provider of your choice, the AT&T or BT or pick any name bandwidth out there. So we can not only help small and medium-sized businesses, but we can also help large organizations. And Tom, if I could ask you just to bounce to the next slide. We recognize the fact that for complex businesses, it can be hard to make a change, right? If you have multiple locations or different lines of business, which often happens in big conglomerates, they can actually operate very independently. So Ribbon, part of what we can do with our session border controllers and our centralized routing agent and analytics is we can enable you to bring together those different environments using Teams phones. And we're brand agnostic. So that means if you still have a combination of Avaya and Cisco, or maybe a Genesys or Nice Contact or Five9's contact center, we can work with all of those. And we have this kind of practical experience. We're lucky enough to have the largest actually Teams phone deployment in the world as our customer. And we also have big universities and hospital, airlines and banks and more. And so I don't want to belabor the Ribbon story anymore. If you're interested in hearing more, you can reach our website. It's rbbn.com. And then just hit the search bar and hit Microsoft, and you'll see a whole bunch of solutions. And at the very end, I'll put a couple of web links in as well, so you can have those for later. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom for tip number 5.
Great, thanks, Greg. And I just want to echo Ribbon. Great stuff. I've been working with them for well over a decade, deploying SBCs around the world, and it's definitely some services to check out, particularly those new kind of SaaS options. Really exciting. Kevin, number 5.
Yeah, so we talked about searching. So I just wanted to, they got the search bar at the top. And definitely Microsoft has made some enhancements here. So, number 1, click in the search bar, type what you're looking for. So in this case, I typed in tips and tricks. press enter, and you'll see you get the consolidated results, meaning you get, all of the matches with messages, people, and files. Now, the good thing now is you can select just to see what you're looking for. And if you move to the next slide, Tom, I'm going to show in a little bigger so we can show the people what you can do there. So there, number one, it's just blown up there. So you can see where if you click on messages, people, or files, you get different filter criteria. So for example, with messages, you can specify, you can limit it to a particular team or a particular channel, a date range in terms of when the message occurred. If you're only, maybe if you're a narcissist and you want to see only people that mentioned you, or no, people that called you out, because maybe that's something you need to follow up about, whether it has an attachment. And then also because if you have bots that put a whole bunch of things into channels, sometimes you want to basically hide that from the search results. With the files, so you can see, you can look at different file types and when it was modified. And the number 3 I've shown, so, my name Keeler, but it's spelled with K-I-E, so people may spell it, differently. But the cool thing is the people search is what they call a soundex or a phonetic search. So if you're looking for somebody, you don't have to actually have the exact spelling of their name. Now, from the results, you can click, on the item, and that brings you. So in the case of a chat message, it'll bring you into the chat with the context of it. It sort of brings you to the item. So like documents, it has a tendency to open up in SharePoint, which isn't necessarily the best experience. And meeting notes, the good news is it actually searches meeting notes now, because for a while with the wiki, it wasn't searching. So that was kind of strange. But they're opened kind of in a kludgy fashion now. So the search works really well. I would say hopefully Microsoft will evolve kind of the opening of the particular item. But definitely, this is a great way to search and find things that you've put in on one of your many messages, chats, or channels.
No, that's a great tip. And search, I think search initially in Teams was not that fantastic. It's had a lot of work done on it. So if you used it early and you turned off from it, go have another look. And Kevin, as you mentioned there, I'm not sure if it's fully rolled out yet, but you can click a message now and it will click through to the entire thread. That feature's either rolled out or rolling out, which makes a huge difference day to day.
Absolutely.
That phonetic search is a really good one. I didn't know that. That's a new tip for me.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome. Number 6, tasks. Like ultimately, we're in Teams hopefully to communicate and get jobs done. And often it can feel like Teams is just endless chat, but actually we're here to do something. So I love this. You can create a task directly from a Teams message. So like right click on the message and you've got create task, where you might find it under more actions, depending on which UI you're in and which other add-ons you've got added. And that will directly create a task in Microsoft To Do. And Microsoft, with their awesome combination of branding, if you add an app in Teams, a personal app called Tasks by Planner, you can search for that in the App Store, that will surface both your Planner tasks and your To Do tasks. So now, not just are you creating the to-do items in Teams, you can actually review your to-do list in Teams. And the killer feature here, the thing that makes this better than any other task manager, is you can see in the notes there, you've got a hyperlink back to the individual message. So what I love about this is if someone's pinged me and I know I've got to do follow-up, I can set it as a task. And when I do the follow-up, I can click the hyperlink and I can reply to that message. So I can quote reply the message. So even if I'm coming back to it a day or two later, the context is preserved and also the channel of communications is preserved. So if we're in a chat conversation or a channel conversation, all the replies are coming back to the place where the conversation was had, rather than what you might tend to do with an out of band is I would get a task to follow up with Kevin, but I would ping him a DM directly on chat because it's a different task on a different day. What I love about this is it brings all your tasks into one place, but also keeps all the communication in the right team or channel.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good tip. I mean, I have to say, like Microsoft, this whole to-do thing, this is definitely the more is more approach, right? Because there's there's to do and tasks by planner, and and they're starting to integrate those. So this is another one that if you've taken a look at it, you probably want to take a new look at it. And it does take some getting used to. I think, you highlighted, Tom, some really great capabilities, but I think you got to give it a week to try to figure this out, right? Because it does take a little while to figure out how all these pieces fit together.
Definitely. And the branding is a bit all over the place, to be honest. It takes a while. Like, for example, you can run the Full To Do app and also see these items, and it's synchronizing in your tasks and flags from Outlook. So you have very different interfaces to this same list, which is a benefit because it means your flagged items in Outlook are showing up in the same place as your task list. But yeah, to your point, Kevin, give it a week or maybe longer to kind of, particularly if you use a different to-do app, it takes a while to get your head around it. But if you're a day-to-day Teams user, odds are your things to do from other people are going to come as chat messages, channel messages, or emails, and you can capture all three here.
Yeah, that's right. So we talked about searching to find something, but there's this great feature that is about, allows you to save important messages. Now, this works with any chat or channel post. So, for instance, if my colleague Dino Caputo, who I saw is on this call, a lot of times, like, he'll say, okay, well, here's the URL for something that's important for me, and I know I'm going to want to remember. So what you can do is you can just, click on the three dots, the ellipsis, to display the menu as shown as number 1. That pops up, and then you pick Save This Message, and then the message is saved. So now if you go to the next slide, you have 2 ways to then retrieve the saved messages. You can use that tip number 1, command bar, and type in /saved, and then you have a list of all of your saved messages. Or you can go and click on the profile picture, which I've shown in number 1, and then underneath it, you'll just click saved, and then you can see a list of saved messages. So I use this for, a lot of times it is URLs or just detailed information that I know I'm going to need again, but I don't want to search through everything. And once, if you decide that it's no longer of use, if a saved message, you can go and just click on the 3 dots, and then as opposed to saying saved, it'll say unsaved. And so then you can remove it from your saved messages list. So really great way to be able to quickly go to key messages that you've received from your colleagues.
Yeah, that's a good one. And finding that saved items is an interesting thing. Everybody sees where they can press saved on the message. I think it's a slightly unusual positioning that it's under the profile. So when you know where it is, that's really handy.
Or use that command, tip number 1, type in the command, saved.
Yeah. So I am the nerd about this one because it doesn't feel like a very exciting, sexy tip, but I had to think about what makes the most value to me day to day as a user. And this is way, way up there. So Kevin talked about search and all the power of search, but also Teams has a lot of filter options on it. So when you're in the chat UI or the Teams UI, as in Teams and channels, at the very top, you have a filter button. I've seen people mistake this for search. It's not search. It doesn't search everything. It filters. So if you very quickly want to get to a particular chat, you can use the filter, and it's filtering based on the chat name. So what you can do with chats is you can click the 3 dots and rename them as well. So something we do internally is we follow the format of initials for internal chats. So that'll be Lindsay, me, and my colleague Kevin Oliver, LATAKO, as our 3-person chat. So at any time I can type KO and I'll get all the variants of combinations. Obviously we're 5 people, so we haven't done many variants yet, but for your immediate people you work with, it's really handy to have those chats ready. But also you can name them by, general team chat, whatever it is. And the same applies to channels. And obviously chat, we're trying to keep that fairly light, as in little messages back and forth. If you're using a project, you really want to be doing channel messages for the relevant topic. People find it hard to quickly get to that channel. And that's the second part of this tip, is also pinning. So you can pin particular chats, but also particular channels, and they will show up at the very top of your chat. And that makes it super easy to find the immediate chats that you use every day. So strongly recommend renaming those multi-party chats to something logical for you. Otherwise, you're going to search for Tom on the filter and get 100 different chats with Tom in, because guess what? There's a lot of Toms and a lot of chats. And also pin those top chats and top channels you want, and they'll show up in the UI really easy to access.
I'm glad you explained that, because when I saw that slide, that La Ta Co, I was like, what is that tip? Right. So now I understand. I'm like, that's not a simple name. Like, what? Okay. So
yeah, Lindsay gets a lot of chat messages from me in the context of some are with Kevin, some are with Tom, some are with. So yeah, it's it doesn't make sense until it makes sense.
No, that was a good explanation. Well, so I believe this is my final tip. So one of the things that I think is pretty cool is, after you join a meeting, you can also join on your mobile. And so what happens is, so you see number 1 on your mobile, you pick join, and then that pops up number 2, where you can just like add the device or transfer to the device. I mean, transfer is great if you're being mobile, but a lot of times I'll pick to add the device, because then what you can do on your mobile is, well, you can add reactions, but you can also share your camera to show what you're seeing. Now, as we were putting these tips together, Tom tried to take one of my tips and he used it. And so Greg said it's a dog eat dog world. So one of the things, if you share your camera on your mobile, if you go to the next slide, Tom, you'll see that you can use your mobile to show cute pet pictures. So here's my Siberian Husky that's under my desk right now. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tom. But I don't know if in your next tip you're going to have cute animals. So I think
you might have won with the animal vote there for sure.
There you go.
Well,
so let's see.
Tom, if you know Kevin long enough, you realize there's no time when he doesn't. I even know the name of the dog. He works Kai into every presentation.
I know.
That's taming teams, right? I think a husky is the perfect. Yeah, the husky is a perfect model for teams. Powerful, but sometimes temperamental.
See, I don't have any pets, so I can't work in that animal vote. I'm gonna have to get my girls into next slides next time. Cool. So I'm going to round it out with my last tip of the session. Again, thanks everybody for coming to this. We'll throw up a vote just in a second. So this is my last one, and probably the most advanced one, but automating messages with Power Automate. So part of the value of Teams is bringing all your work into one place. And sometimes that can seem very intimidating, but you can start off really, really light. So something I do a lot of, for those that know me, I try and follow all the Teams news and keep up to date. RSS feeds pumped into Teams is a massive win for me. So I have lots of RSS feeds from various Microsoft and Blogger friends. Those all get picked up by Power Automate and posted into a chat. And you can post into an individual chat. You can post into a channel. You can push to a particular user. So something that's great to do if you're in a group environment, you might be in IT or marketing or HR, you can push relevant articles or relevant updates into a group, into a channel, and that becomes both a resource and a discussion point. And really, there's no bounds to what you can do there in terms of automation. So you can take any action in, a new file got created, tell somebody the file got created, a deal closed, post that the deal got closed. And again, you can point these at individual group chats or users or channels. And if you want to take that to the next level, you have adaptive cards as well. So I pulled up this example from the internet, but essentially you can have, and these are not high-end developer type things. These are things that you can put together either as a power user or with a little bit of development help. But you can have buttons, you can have interactions, and you can take the results from these. So this could be your own internal sign-off process, your approval process. You see here, someone's putting in an answer and pressing approve. There's a lot of value to be had here. I would say just dabble in this, have a go, look at some RSS feeds. And if you need support, reach out to somebody who can help you. But you can both save time and really increase team communication by bringing those conversations all into one place.
It's like 2 tips. He squeezed 2, no animal. He squeezed 2 tips.
Yeah.
Well done.
Awesome. Cool. So thanks everybody for attending. We had a massive turnout and really good conversation in the chat. And this is something we'll definitely do more of if it's been valuable to you. Lindsay, I think you're going to throw up a poll and that will have all of our tips in. So we'll see which tip was the top tip So don't be biased by good looks or animal photos. Just whatever you think was the top tip for this session. While you're voting, for those who asked in the chat, yes, we'll be sharing recording, we'll be sharing deck. That'll all be coming out by Ribbon. So look out for those.
And Tom, I did put everybody's website in here. If somebody wants to reach anybody, including Ribbon, I also put a couple links to a few of our assets to support migrating to Teams. But, there was a great question that came up a minute ago, and somebody asked Kevin, could they use their mobile device as a secondary content source during the Teams meeting? And I believe, if memory serves me, that that capability just came into being with the more recent Teams update. Does that ring a bell? Have I got that right?
I'm not sure if they mean like as the content camera. So do you mean like where you hold it up to like a whiteboard, that type of content camera? Or you certainly can share content. So I didn't see the question.
I'm going to go back here.
As you say, if it's mobile, you've just got a camera essentially, so you can point that at things. If you want it to do intelligent framing of a whiteboard, that needs to be a webcam. So webcams can do now desk view, and they can capture whiteboards just from the Teams client. So it's a real good education scenario there, where the teacher can rock into a room with a whiteboard and a webcam, and off they go with capturing books or capturing whiteboards.
Right.
And Oliver responded, he was thinking about it as a content camera, as sort of a whiteboard content camera, much like you would use a Brio or a typical webcam.
Right. So for right now, the mobile device, as far as I know, you cannot do that full content camera.
Yeah, that's right. Where the mobile really shines is like physical product demos. I've seen it used in retail, and to great effect, where they're manufacturing on one site and they're reviewing on the other, and you can hold that iPhone camera right into the stitching and see what's going on in the product. It's a really nice touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then awesome. I thought the other thing that was interesting was, and Tom, you commented on it, somebody brought up a fact that if your corporate retention policy doesn't allow saving messages, then in some cases you may not be able to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Save message saves. That's an interesting naming, isn't it? Because you save the messages and you bookmark it effectively. But a retention policy that says messages get deleted after X time will delete that message. So yes, you're not saving them beyond your retention. It's very important if you use retention to educate users on what the implications of that are as well.
Well, and especially when external guests join. So, one of the things that I think is very interesting, which is maybe a tip for next time, is speaker coach or meeting recordings. But if the retention policy for who's hosting it, depending on how it's set, that isn't preserved after the meeting, because the retention policy, I think to your point, Tom, make sure that people understand how that's impacting internal and external users as well.
Yeah, and I can see why organizations set retention policies, but I'm always kind of rallying towards having them longer where you can, because I've certainly seen, certainly early on in the Teams journey, some legal firms put a very, very low retention on chat. And then you see crazy things like people screenshot chat and send it as an email to get the acknowledgement that they have the message. So just be careful with retention policies, what you're causing your users to do and why you're having them. Okay, I think the votes are in. We've had a great number of votes. Very good spread, which is nice to see that people took different value. But unequivocally, with 23% of the votes, I see the command bar and favorite commands has it. So, Kevin, you are the winner of the best tip of the day.
Oh, there you go. And I noticed we used the English, the UK spelling of favorite. So I think that maybe is what encouraged it, right? So,
that must be it.
Well, no, this has been terrific. I certainly learned a few things from you, Tom, as always, and then Greg, thank you very much for having Ribbon, sponsor this. I think that this was a terrific turnout. So there's tons of power inside of Teams, and it keeps growing. And so certainly for everybody, I think, help your colleagues. If you're an IT pro, certainly, share some of these tips out, because you can really make people's life a little bit easier every day, if they're living in Teams.
Yeah, and Kevin, Tom, thank you both, and we look forward to hosting another one of these. Maybe in a few months we'll have round 2. And so, Tom, you'll have, we'll call it Tom's Redemption.
I'll have to work harder and come back to fight another day. First drinks on me at Enterprise Connect. All's fair there.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing anybody who is on and is traveling to Enterprise Connect. Somebody asked early on, I'm delivering 3 sessions. I know Tom is going to be there, as well as Ribbon has a booth. So certainly come and find any of us. It's going to be great to see people in person again.
Yeah, that's right. And you can visit Ribbon at booth 427 if you want to check out our solutions as well. I'll get that in there before we head out the door.
Very good. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending. Recordings and deck will be distributed. Do feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And again, thanks to Greg and Ribbon for supporting Empowering Cloud and for this webinar. I think it's been really good, and we'll definitely have round 2. And I'll sharpen my pencil on my tips for next time.
Yeah, you better
Thanks,
get at
everybody.
it. Take care.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.